You've been led astray. I gave you a good YouTube starting point, and you quickly found that. How many clicks did it take you to get to that?
Actually, this is Facebook, but
You started off at the bottom then.
Do we have follow-up this week?
I put in the link here and I had to pronounce this person's name, but now I realize I haven't followed the link.
Would you like a moment? Would you like me to stall for you for a moment?
Yeah, hang on a second.
So, John, you didn't do your homework?
No, I did. It's open in a tab right there. Right? I listened to it and it didn't help.
Oh, so it was lost. It was lost amongst your tabs, was it?
Lost. It was right next to the ATP tab.
Mm-hmm.
He knew exactly where it was the whole time.
Yep, totally.
That's right. I just didn't actually click on it. The keyboard, you can't just open the tab. You have to actually go to the thing and play it. Anyway, this feedback is from Urka, according to Google Translate, which I'm assured is accurate in this case. Regarding the eyesight replacement for the iPhone 6 Plus, like the problems that are having, you can get it replaced under warranty or whatever. This question is there a reason Apple can't just send a notification to the affected devices? Why do we have to go to like a web form and enter your serial number to find out if your device is the one that has the type of problem? And I thought that was an interesting question because there is two aspects of it. One is the technical. Could Apple even do that? And second is the privacy-related one. Would Apple actually want to do that? Technically speaking, I think Apple could do that. Surely there is software running on iPhones that has access to the serial number information, like Apple software. Even if third-party apps don't, Apple's makes the OS, so they can get that information. But they would have to build that into the OS, where like periodically it phones home and says, are there any relevant recalls or updates for this thing? If so, blah, blah, blah. And the privacy aspect one is, does Apple know that phone serial number XYZ belongs to an individual person? I suppose they do, because you've got the, Find My iPhone type thing, but I'm not sure what Apple does with that information. So my answer to this feedback is they probably could. And I would imagine the reason they don't is that they don't have the code for that built in, and it's probably like a low priority since these recalls don't happen that often. And building it in is just like that whole mechanism seems like it has the potential to be difficult to implement in a way that doesn't expose more information about a person to Apple, because Apple generally doesn't want to know, wants to know as little about you as possible, and potentially to other things they're going to exploit, whatever hole this pokes in a thing that periodically pulls some location and uploads information about your phone to it. So I don't know. You guys have thoughts on that?
Well, I think they almost certainly could do this kind of thing if they wanted to. And there is one thing to consider also, that the quote recall or whatever it is, the service extension, whatever technically it is, they say multiple times on that page that it only applies to iPhone 6 Pluses with the serial number range that are in working order. And so that probably gives them the ability to say, well, this phone that you're handing us is all beat up, and we're not going to repair this horribly beat up phone with the broken screen and the dent all over it for this camera thing, because you've obviously abused this phone, or it isn't in good working order. So it gives them an out, and there's no way for them to know on the server side, what kind of condition your phone is in physically, really. And so they probably don't want to send this to people whose devices are ineligible. Secondly,
you think they're doing it to save money?
Well, at least to save a lot of requests from people who won't be satisfied. But also, they might be doing it to save money. They might actually say, this is really only affecting some of these phones, and it says it makes it kind of clear in the language on the page that in one place where it states the conditions, I believe the first time it states the conditions, it says phones that are in good working order and are exhibiting this problem. And then the second time it mentions it doesn't mention whether the phone has to be exhibiting the problem to have the repair done. But it looks like they're trying not to replace or not to service phones that don't necessarily need it. And that could be something like, well, we're only going to service the ones whose cameras are actually showing this problem, according to a genius who looks at it. Or also, it could mean, we're only going to serve this problem for people who notice the problem. and who care about the problem. So it probably is, to some degree, trying to minimize the number of people who even know about this problem and who go in to get things fixed and who go in and, load the Apple stores and the repair centers with even more people and money.
Yeah, I was just about to say that it seems like it would be a tough thing to figure out how let's assume they want to notify everyone. How do you do that exactly? By that, I mean, do you just send one massive notification to everyone that has an affected device? That's probably unwise because the Apple Store is going to have a pretty crummy day the next few days. Do you do it in batches? Well, then the internet eventually finds out that they're doing this in batches, and then the internet is enraged because this iPhone issue you didn't even know you had isn't getting fixed at the schedule you would like it to be fixed. And so how does that even work? It just seems like a nightmare. There's no good reason for Apple to do this. Do agree with Urka, but I don't think that there's anything in it for Apple, and all it does is make things kind of more challenging for them.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like an urgent issue. Like, as the chat room pointed out, they don't need to have the phones polling or anything. They could just do a push notification. And, the serial number, like when you do Find My iPhone and list all your devices, they know your devices. They have this information available to them. And the OS wouldn't need to poll. They would just need to, send out a push notification to all things. But it's not like batteries may explode. You need to know right now. It's more like the kind of thing that they would probably email you. And as long as you used an Apple ID, they have at least one email, with your phone and set it up with an Apple ID. They have one email address, and it's the type of thing they could send out the emails. And I don't think it matters if you send all the emails at once or in batches, because people aren't immediately going to run out. Again, it's not urgent. People immediately aren't going to run out to the store. They read their email whenever they read it, then they look at it half the people will forget that they read it. Other people maybe put a reminder in their calendar. I think there won't be a big rush on Apple stores no matter how you notify about it. And it just doesn't seem that urgent, like for this particular thing. And the money-saving aspect definitely has something to it. But yeah, a lot of these type of things that don't happen very often, that aren't an essential, expected part of the product experience, tend to be done in not just in Apple, but in every company, tend to be done in sort of ways that seem inefficient or not high-tech, because it's not, the stuff that happens all the time, software updates, for example, like expected parts of the life cycle of a product are iterated on and improved and made more streamlined and made efficient and so on and so forth. And these things that happen rarely or are supposed to happen rarely, it's like, well, we'll just slap something together. Even something like, not that I'm excusing this, but you can think about the whole pushing the U2 album onto everyone's things. That's not a thing that happens all the time. Like, that was, as far as I know, that's the only time they ever did that. It's not as if there's an established system for doing this in a way that has been proven to be efficient and non-annoying. They just probably went to them and just said, well, can we, because they probably couldn't give everyone promo codes, because their promo code system probably couldn't handle that, because there's just too many people and they don't want to, so they probably went to the people and say, what's the best way we can give everyone this for free? Can we make it free for a day on the store? Well, then people might not redeem it. And, part of it was they really wanted this music to actually be on people's things without them having to do anything. Like, in other words, you had to opt out instead of opt in. But the way that they did it was just so clumsy and ham-fisted. And at least part of that has to be, part of it is just wrong-headed thinking. The other part is that it's not something they do every day. So you just got to say, with the mechanisms and tools and services we have at our disposal, what can we do to make this happen? Considering they do have push notifications, that was one of the things it seems like they could have done. But then someone in the meeting would raise their hand and say, yeah, but is this really so important? And then the bean counter guy, like Marco says, won't that make more people come in and try to get this service, whether they need it or not? So going to a web form and entering your serial number looks pretty good in that regard. Can we make a web form? Can we do that? I think so. Get that guy who knows web objects in here.
Well, and also, so this isn't a problem that is so urgent that it will cause data loss or a physical hazard. As you said, there's a battery isn't exploding. You're somebody in the chat was saying how the iMac 3 terabyte drive recall, because I think it was Seagate, whoever made those 3 terabyte drives, they basically all failed everywhere. It wasn't just in iMacs. That whole drive generation was terrible. So they emailed people for that. But that makes sense. This is your data that you could be losing if this drive dies. If in this case, your photos might be blurry on your 6 Plus if it was made in this range. By the way, mine was. My Test 6 Plus, the serial number qualifies, but that's not going to qualify if they actually checked to have it pass. So I figure, I'll worry about it later. But Another thing is, some people might say, well, how do you send a push notification, and will they worry about annoying people? And the answer there is they don't worry about that at all, because they already spam us with push notifications for stupid things.
There are 3 words for that one. Flash flood warning. You ever been in an office when I don't know if you have them down where you are. If you're in the office and there's a flash flood warning, it sounds like the world is coming to an end, as everyone's iPhones go off with this terrible klaxon sound. So I feel like they have... I mean, that's not them, and you can opt out of that. You can turn that stuff off,
Well, and a few people in the chat are saying that's a legal requirement. They had to do that. Anyway, that's separate, though. What I'm talking about is those BS push notifications from the Tips app and from the App Store and from the News app in iOS 9. I've complained for a long time now that there has always been a rule. Ever since push notifications were launched, there was always a rule in the App Store review rules that said that you could not use push notifications for marketing or promotion of any kind. And not only has that rule never been enforced, ever. Like, there's been spam push notifications or push notifications that are for marketing or promotion only. Those have existed since the beginning of time, and very popular apps have always used them. Like, it isn't like it's only a few bad actors who do it. Like, it's common practice. Everybody does it now. And Apple has never seemed to care. Even though they have this rule, they've never seemed to even bother trying to enforce it. And now, Apple has started breaking that rule themselves. And that, they don't seem to care, or, obviously, Apple is not one person. So certain teams obviously don't seem to care, but, to me, that's extremely inappropriate. And maybe it just seems like this is one of those things that I care a lot more about than everybody else in the world. And so maybe I'm just nuts. But to me, a spam notification is never okay. And it's especially not okay from the platform vendor for a notification that I was opted into by default. That is not cool at all.
No, I couldn't agree more. And the Tips app, I think I'd had it on my phone because it got pushed onto my phone, during a software update or whatever. I think I saw one of the tips come through on Notification Center, and the very next thing I did was grab my phone and turn off all notifications from Tips and bury it in the most deep folder in the middle of nowhere on my home screens, because I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want it. I don't want to be opted into it. I wish I was, I wish it was opt in by me rather than opt in by them. Just no, go away. Don't do it. And it like you said, Marco, it doesn't encourage an app developer to be a good citizen of the platform if the platform vendor's doing the same BS crap that I would want to do as a developer, hypothetically. It's just gross.
This is kind of a larger theme that I keep seeing cracks in the foundation here, and I'm really fearing for this. John mentioned the U2 album, Songs of Innocence, Sounds of Innocence, whatever it was, Spam of Innocence, and there's been things like that. Now these, certain apps showing us notifications from Apple, and it kind of seems like Apple is a big company. They are the man. Talking about, rebelling against IBM, rebelling against the big company, rebelling against the man. Apple is the man now. And Apple is big corporate America now. And most of the time we're able to ignore that. Most of the time that is not a problem in the way that big self-interested only and sometimes tasteless companies, the way they usually act, the way they usually annoy people like us. Usually Apple does not display those qualities. But there have been a few instances recently where it seems like they're slipping. It seems like, and I don't know if this is like a Steve versus Tim thing, probably not, but it seems like Apple is starting to behave more like the giant corporation that they have been for quite some time, and it's starting to negatively affect some of the things they do in ways that annoy people like us who in the past have, Apple's never been perfect, but it sure seems like they're making little bad judgment calls more frequently now than they used to, in ways like spamming us and promoting their own stuff, and promoting Apple Music so heavily in iTunes and the Music app that they've just ruined the entire Music app, and they ruined iTunes to a great degree. Stuff like that. They're making bad calls, and they're doing things that are only self-interested rather than being self-interested that also benefit us.
They ruin iTunes every few years, though. Like, I don't think this ruining of iTunes is much different than all the other times they ruin iTunes. We've talked about iTunes in past shows. I think of all those things, the only one I can kind of defend is the Tips app, because if there's going to be a Tips app, it kind of has to be opt-out. No one is going to... The whole point is the people who need these tips the most have no idea how to opt into it. So, which OS added the thing where you can turn off notifications from the notification? Is that iOS 9?
You can do that?
Yeah, I thought that was in one... I'm not keeping up with iOS stuff, but yeah, I thought that was in one of the things that, like, from the notification, you could say, I don't want to see these notifications anymore, because that's part of the hassle is like...
Oh, that's interesting.
You get the notification. Maybe I'm just misremembering. Chat room will correct me in a second if I'm wrong, but if not, Apple should do this. You get the notification, and even when you know how to do it, you're like, oh, I got to go back to settings, and then notifications, and then scroll until I find the thing, because there's no search. Maybe there is a search on that page. That's another idea. Did they add a search to settings on iOS?
Yes, they did. It almost works.
All right. People in the chat room say I'm thinking of Android, but anyway, yeah, that's a feature that would be handy. But for tips, that has to be opt out, because the whole point of the tips is the people who need the most need to be able, and it can be annoying. Even those tips can be annoying. It's one of the tips. One of the first tips should, or maybe the second tip should be, don't want to see any more of these tips. Here's how you turn them off. Now someone on the chat room is saying that I'm correct, that you can't turn them off from the notification. Anyway, I haven't installed iOS 9 yet, in case you haven't noticed. But yeah, all the other stuff, I don't know. It's hard for me to discern trends here. The only trend I can maybe pick out is that when Jobs was still around, they seemed much more limited in the things they were willing to try. Like, they didn't try a lot of stuff.
That's true.
They were very limited, and you could kind of, I don't know if this is actually true, but you can kind of get a feel for, like, things that you would imagine Steve Jobs would find distasteful didn't get out the door. Is that because he was micromanaging everything, or is that because everyone around him thought to themselves, if I show this to Steve, he'll tell me it's crappy and we shouldn't put it out or whatever? Whereas the Tim Cook's Apple is trying much more things, and overall, I think that's a benefit, because we just get so many things that we've wanted for so long that, you know, I mean, just look at iOS 8 and all the other stuff. But on the other side, you have like that, we never talked about it, but that promotional site about what's so amazing about the iPhone and how app reviewers have great ideas and stuff like that. Like, that would never have come out of, if that had passed under the nose of Steve Jobs, he would, that's not the kind of BS that he has a different brand of BS that he would like to put out. And that is not the correct brand of BS. So I'm mostly, I think it's still a net positive. I'm willing to deal with the bumps in the road here, but a lot of these things just reveal, like I said, for the ability to turn off the notification from the notification. That's just a feature they should have. And you could say the problem is they keep sending too many notifications, or the Tips app annoys me, or even stuff like, I can't delete these apps off the phone, I should be able to hide them or whatever. Those are exactly the type of things that Tim Cook's Apple seems more receptive to hearing the cries about, and they'll get to them eventually. Obviously, the ability to actually hide the Stocks app or whatever is probably really low on the list of long-standing complaints about iOS in terms of impact. And it's like, well, just put them in a folder. That's what everyone else does. But I think they will eventually get to it. Unlike the pre-Tim Cook Apple, where you're like, you know what, they're never going to let me hide the Stocks app. Just put it in a folder, no big deal.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like, what you said is correct, that it does seem like, we have now a different brand of BS, and Steve's BS, whether it was better aligned with us, or whether we were just used to it, or whether we just liked Steve as a character and kind of rolled it in, who knows? Well,
it was a personification. Like, we're pretending it's Steve's BS. All it was Apple's BS when Steve was the CEO. And so everything was like mapped onto him. It's like, well, I don't know what actually went on inside the company, so I'll pretend this was Steve Jobs' idea. Like, that was just the external simplification of the black box that was Apple. And same thing we're doing with like Tim Cook's Apple or whatever. We have no real way of knowing what's going on internally. All we're doing is trying to, you just said, Apple's not one person, but we're modeling it. Pretend it's a person. What is the personality of that person? What kind of person is this Apple,
Well, and, so many big corporations behave like the out-of-touch men in their 50s who run them. And it shows. And Apple has been run by men in their 50s for a while now, but it really didn't behave that way. It didn't seem that way. They didn't seem as out of touch as that kind of group usually does to people like us. But for some reason now I'm not feeling that confident in that anymore. It does seem like that has changed without Steve, or at least in the same time that Steve unfortunately passed away and the leadership changed and everything. It now seems more like what it is, which is a group of old guys trying to figure out what's cool and trying to like kind of yell at us now to tell us what's cool.
Just hang in there, Marco. Soon you'll be an old guy in his 50s, and then everything will all match up again, and you'll be happy.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm already not cool, and I'm only 34, 33, 33. I'm only I never know. I gotta figure it out every time. I'm already not cool. I know that, but I would not be running something where I have to decide important things that other people should think are cool.
Coolness is just about taste. That's what it always comes down to, is like what seems a tasteful, appropriate thing to do. What's too flashy, what's too flamboyant, what's too obviously BS, like make your BS at least be clever. What is actually inspiring versus what is cloying. Like it's difficult to do. It's difficult to do as an individual, let alone trying to herd a giant multi-billion-dollar organization to present a face to the world that most people who look on it decide that it is tasteful. The things they do are tasteful. Like that's a tall order. So
it is, but like the things that we've seen from Apple in recent time that have seemed distasteful to us, things like, you know, the spam of innocence, things like the weird presentations they keep giving, and the weird Eddie Q segment and the Apple Music segment, and like all this stuff. You know, this seems like they're letting a lot of things out that, you know, Steve's brand of BS and the flaws Steve will let out would be things like, oh yeah, the iPod Hi-Fi, that's totally going to be an awesome deal and people are going to buy it. You know, like that was like Steve's kind of BS. Like,
and then the game was figuring out, does he really like the iPod Hi-Fi? Probably he does, because if he didn't like it, why would he even be introducing it? He didn't like the Motorola Rocker, and we could tell.
Right.
It kind of seemed like he really liked the iPod Hi-Fi, and I guess it was okay, but the rest of the world did not like the iPod Hi-Fi, except for Jason Snell, who loves it. But everyone else was...
But like, yeah, like sometimes Steve thought something would, or at least seemed to think something would be a great success and that people would have no problem with its price or limitations. And then the market said very clearly otherwise. That was Steve's, I think that was Steve's biggest or most common flaw in judgment. Whereas now, current Apple, we have other flaws in judgment that are very different, and to me, a little more worrisome. And maybe it's no big deal. You know, maybe I'm overthinking it. That's very possible.
But don't you think it's offset by the other changes in judgment of, like, is it a good idea for apps to have extensions or to have third-party keyboards, setting aside the really buggy implementation? The new Apple says yes. The old Apple says no. I like the new Apple decision better. I think that outweighs all of this stuff.
I think you're right, and that's why, like, overall, you know, I think Apple is in a better position now than they were, say, 5 years ago. You know, overall, things are better. Not everything is better, but overall, I think you're right that things are better. It seems like, you know, we all thought that after Steve, Apple, you know, we were all telling ourselves back then, you know, Apple will be okay. You know, it maybe it won't change very much. But I think what we're seeing is how it has changed, and it isn't all for the better. And there are a lot of things that are better, but obviously, like, you can't have such an incredibly strong personality who had tons of power. You can't have that kind of person at the top of the company who then leaves and nothing changes. You know, like it was never going to be nothing will change, and it was never going to, and it was never realistic to think that the things that we loved about Apple would all survive this transition. Some of them haven't. And I think that's a little sad.
Yeah. We really need to talk about something that's awesome, but very, very quickly, I just wanted to apologize for all the people who've been writing me saying, oh my God, now I see a crescent on my iPhone. What have you done? Sorry, guys, but welcome to the club. Anyway, why don't you tell us about something that's cool, Marco?
Our first sponsor this week is Harry's. Go to harrys.com and use promo code ATP to save $5 off your first purchase. Harry's offers high-quality razors and blades for a fraction of the price of the big razor brands. They make their own blades from their own factory, which they bought. It's an old blade factory in Germany. They liked it so much they bought it. These are high-quality, high-performing German blades crafted by shaving experts, giving you a better shave that respects your face and your wallet. They offer factory direct pricing at a fraction of the big brand's price. Harry's blades are about half the price. Plus, you don't have to wait around for some guy to come unlock the case in the drugstore or whatever. They ship them directly to your door. The starter set is an amazing deal. For $15, you get a razor, moisturizing shave cream or gel, your choice, and 3 razor blade cartridges. When you need more blades, they're just $2 each or less. An 8-pack is just $15. A 16-pack is just $25. You try to buy 16 Gillette Fusion blades, which I think are probably the most comparable blades, it's $56. Harry's, $25. It's incredible how much cheaper these things are. It's, again, less than half the price in almost every case. I've been a huge shaving nerd before. I've tried everything from DE safety blades, from the Feather and all the other fancy brands, all the way up to the Fusion Pro Glide and everything else from the Gillette line. And I can tell you, Harry's is by far the best value in the business, no question. And I would say the quality is very, very similar in almost every possible way to Gillette Fusion blades. And the Harry's handles look way better. Just everything about Harry's is so much classier. It's a better experience buying it. They have great support if you ever need it for any order help or anything. It is impossible to overstate the difference in quality and experience and design between Harry's and the other big brands. So check it out. Go to harrys.com, use promo code ATP to save $5 off your first purchase. Get a starter set today with a handle, 3 blades, and shaving cream for just $15, including free shipping right to your door. harrys.com, promo code ATP. Thanks a lot.
All right. I wanted to quickly talk about something I've been thinking about on and off all day today. And we've been talking a lot about Force Touch and kind of tangentially the haptic engine and how it would be used on the iPhone. And something that had occurred to me, and I don't recall us talking about this, what if it was opt-in, kind of like iPad multitasking gestures? You know, the 5-finger pinch and the 4-finger swipes. What if it was opt-in? And so all the confusion that we were worried about from normal users that had never experienced Force Touch before and don't really know what it's all about, what if it was optional? Like, would that be a reasonable solution to the problem? I'm still not sure what it would do necessarily, but maybe it's an optional long press. But like you were saying before, Marco, on a prior episode, but the key is that it's opt-in, and by default, it doesn't do anything.
You can't market it that way, though. If they're going to put a Force Touch on the screen, you can be pretty darn sure that it's going to be one of the very high up bullet point features of the iPhone 6S or whatever they end up calling it. And if it's opt-in, people are going to get it and say, I saw the TV ad where they did this thing. How do I do that thing? Oh, you got to go to settings. I feel like it can't possibly be opt-in just for marketing reasons. That is assuming they even tell you that it's there. If they don't mention it and decide this is not going to be a marketing feature, that would seem weird to me. Like, why build the sensors in and not... Like, usually there aren't that many marketing features for the S revision phones because it's going to look the same as the other one, and they maybe change the materials and tweak this and tweak that. But it's not like, oh, this one has, Touch ID. That's the type of feature that you get when the whole phone changes shape in the, the sort of 2-year cadence that Apple's on right now. So any kind of feature that you can say, that you added in an S revision year, I feel like they really want to tout it. So I cannot imagine it being opt-in unless they really, really, really couldn't figure out what the hell to do with Force Touch on the phone. And then like, if we can't figure out what to do with it, we should just leave it in kind of experimental mode for now.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. The other thing I was thinking about is what if they don't do Force Touch, but still have the haptic engine? So what if it's not about pushing, quote unquote, through the display? It's not about having different interaction paradigms from user to phone, but it's about having a different interaction paradigm phone to user. So maybe it's like the Rumble Pack was to us back when we were playing Nintendo games. That's for you, John. When the Rumble Pack was new, it's sort of like that, where it's a different response mechanism, but maybe there isn't a Force Touch on the phone.
Well, they already have that. Like, the vibration motor is already in there. I saw a couple people tweeting about this. They're like, oh, they can make it so you can feel when you rub over a certain thing. I don't think they're going to put a different physical thing that shakes your phone inside the phone. I think there's going to be one thing that shakes your phone. Maybe that thing will be changed slightly to give different kinds of feedback, but it's still just going to be one thing. It's the thing that makes your phone vibrate when you put it on silent. It's the thing that that's going to do any kind of haptic feedback. That doesn't require any anything more than just a plain old touch sensor. The force sensor, the whole point of that is to give a more accurate reading of how hard you're pressing on the screen, more accurate than seeing how much your finger squishes, which I think is not the best way to do that. So if they're going to build that in, if they're going to put those little sensors in there, I feel like it has to be a combination of, now we can tell how hard you're pressing, and now we can press you back by wiggling the whatever little thing they have in there that vibrates the phone. And yeah, we'll just have to see what they decide to do with it. It's the type of thing they have to be careful with, because you usually don't get a chance to totally, take a mulligan on a major input device or whatever. Like double clicking, whether that was a smart move or not, it's really difficult. You can't go like 3 years into the Mac and say, you know what? Double click doesn't mean open anymore. We changed our mind. In fact, there's no more double click, or double click means something entirely different. In the world of touch, maybe you get a little bit of chance, like you mentioned, the gestures that are opt-in on the iPad, but those are, like, someone thought that was a good idea. That's another one that kind of leaked out. Someone thought that was a good idea, but then other people immediately realized if you try to play Fruit Ninja with it, you'll end up going back to the home screen all the time. So their solution was not, let's not ship that feature until we figure out how to make it work. Their solution was, all right, off by default. People can turn it on if they want. And it's a shame because that gesture is so addictive on the iPad, but you really can't play Fruit Ninja with it. So I don't know what they do there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking, the story here is probably very boring. It is probably not anything super clever. It is probably Force Touch is Force Touch. It's advertised as Force Touch. It is some kind of, tertiary, secondary click that will bring up some kind of secondary, tertiary function. And there will be some kind of API to access this gesture. I think that we're overthinking it. I really think this is just, it's going to be a feature added because they can. Somebody at Apple clearly really loves Force Touch. Like somebody who matters a lot clearly loves it. And maybe it's multiple people who matter a lot.
Well, you can see on the watch why they kind of had to do it, because they needed more input methods. Like
on the watch, it makes sense. I don't, I've obviously said this a lot. I don't think it makes a lot of sense in the trackpads, and if it makes sense in just the MacBook One trackpad for thinness reasons, okay. Although, is it really? Like, I've never listened to it, but like I was thinking on my dog walk today, because that's where I do all my thinking. Is it really thinner to have the whole linear actuator and everything down there? That's thinner than a button? I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Putting it in all of the laptops, I think, it was maybe premature or unwarranted, but
so far most of the feedback from the youngsters is like, Marco is an old man and we all love this better. And
yeah, I guess this is my old man phase now, beginning in my life.
I think it's not really, because I think several years from now you'll be okay with it and you'll go back and use one of the ones that had the button that moved, and it will feel broken to you. You're like, oh, the whole thing tilts down.
It's very possible. And I said before, like, I don't hate the Force Touch trackpad. I just think it's worse than the old one. And, I'm not going to not buy a new laptop ever again to avoid it, but I don't think I'm going to love it when I have to make the transition.
You should circle back to bagging on the keyboard, because I think that is a more safe redoubt for you to build your argument.
Right. Well, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so, the addition of Force Touch, obviously they're putting this across the whole product line. I think this is maybe yet another thing that kind of ties into what I was saying earlier, which is like, I think that this is really going to be lost on so many people. I mean, it's already, I already think that they've blown the execution on the Mac side, where, making it a tertiary click is weird. Designing it in such a way that the click feedback that you get feels noticeably worse than the old button, I think was a poor choice. If they had a choice, they might not have, who knows. And on the phone, if everything we're hearing from various tip sources is correct, that it is just like a right click, and it's another level of interaction of, oh well, you got to go around like shoving everything on the screen to see what it can do. Like that kind of sucks. Like it'll be useful, I think, for games and for like there was a good discussion on this on Upgrade this week. We'll link to that. Well, by the time you guys hear this, Upgrade last week, and it was very good. And they were pointing out, this could really be useful for games of having like a different.
Wait for the first person to have the test your strength game to try to see if they can get people to punch their thumbs through their phone screens. Press harder. Oh, you haven't done it yet. Keep going. Yeah, it's probably really easy to max out the sensors, so I guess you can't do that, but that would be fun.
Well, and also if Apple enforces their App Store rules anymore, which is a big if, these push notifications, there is a rule against apps that encourage people to damage their devices.
I think it'll be pretty easy to max out the 4 sensors, so I don't think you can make a game like that anyway. But
well, people will try. But yeah, so that I think it's going to be a really kind of boring new feature that's not going to set the world on fire in the same way that the Mac Force Touch trackpads have been.
I still think like if it's easy to do, even if they can't figure out a use for it yet, I think there is a potential use for it. And as long as they don't go hog wild with it, making like every screen that's part of the OS and every control has something that you can force touch. It can't be like mystery meat navigation. It can't be like playing Myst where you have to be like, do I tap this? Do I double tap this? Do I long press it? Do I force touch it? They really need to figure out what they're going to do with it in their apps anyway. And then like third parties can dig their own graves. Like if they want to have, if Marco wants to have like, oh, you don't know, you have to go into settings and don't tap the switch, but force touch it. Like no one's going to do that. And if they do, that's their own stupid fault. So if they make the API open enough, then you can do that now with like, oh, you got to long press that control. You can't just tap it. What do you mean long press? I don't know what a long press is, but they can do that. But Apple needs to set the example by just using it. And I think they did okay on the Mac, like fast forward and rewind for the video thing or QuickTime Player. That is a very specific, very focused use of Force Touch. That is not like, we're defining a new language that you can use in every app. Go into a Finder window and press down and it will zoom in on the window, or your icons will slide to the left or the right. They didn't do that there. So I think it's just, finding the 1 or 2 places where you can use it, it actually is kind of cool, and then not looking in other apps and saying, where can I use Force Touch? Like if you find yourself doing that, you're probably doing it wrong.
Our second sponsor this week is Warby Parker. Warby Parker believes that prescription glasses simply should not cost $300 or more. They bypass the traditional channels and sell high-quality, better-looking prescription eyeglasses online at a fraction of the usual retail prices, starting at just $95. Go to warbyparker.com/ATP to see more. Their designs are vintage-inspired with a contemporary twist. Every pair is custom fit with anti-reflective, anti-glare polycarbonate prescription lenses, and every pair comes with a very nice hard case and cleaning cloth, so you don't need to buy any overpriced accessories. Warby Parker now offers progressive lenses starting at just $295, including the frames. Progressive lenses have a distance prescription at the top, and they transition to a reading lens near the bottom. And these are digital freeform progressives, which is the most advanced progressive technology, with higher precision and a larger field of vision than traditional progressive lenses. Now, buying glasses online sounds like it would be very risky. How would you know whether they'll fit, how they'll look on you? Warby Parker has you covered. First of all, their website has a very helpful tool that uses your computer's webcam to give you a preview of how the glasses will look on your face. It can even help you measure your eyes and face to get the fit exactly right. But the best part is their home try-on program. You can borrow up to 5 pairs of glasses risk-free that they will ship to you, also for free. You can try them on in the comfort of your own home for 5 days. Then you can send them back with a prepaid return label, again, free, and there's no obligation to buy, still free. So check out the Home Try-On program. It is awesome. They also offer prescription and non-prescription polarized sunglasses. And this is a great price, even for the non-prescription ones, believe me. Now, Warby Parker also believes in giving back to the world. For every pair of glasses they sell, they give another pair to somebody in need through various vision charities around the world. So go to warbyparker.com/ATP and check out their great selection of premium quality, affordable eyewear. Get yourself a home try-on kit risk-free. And I think all 3 of us have either ourselves or family members who have used Warby Parker glasses and are very happy with them. Mm-hmm. It is great. Everyone loves Warby Parker who uses them. Check it out. warbyparker.com/ATP. Thanks a lot to Warby Parker for sponsoring our show.
Okay, so by the time most people have heard this news is going to be a week or 2 old. But a little while ago, there was a really kind of ugly article posted by the New York Times about Amazon and what it's like to work there and their company culture and their hiring practices. And it made a pretty big splash. And the short version of the article was it's terrible to work there. But I don't know. I only had a chance to read about the first half of it, and even after having read that much, I thought, my goodness, I would never ever want to work at this place because, among many other things, I like to see my family once every 16 years. I don't know, John, how would you summarize this, and what did I leave out? Because I know that there was a lot in this article. It was long.
So the badness about Amazon is basically that they expect you to dedicate yourself, mind, body, and soul to the company, to work very long hours, to put your job before your family and your health and the rest of your life, to just really, be sort of in full throttle mode all the time for the company. And if you can't do that, and if you're not super smart and not able to do a million things at once and have lots of work heaped on you, then you're not, the idea is like that Amazon is a demanding place to work. They only want the smartest people who get the most done and the best, hardest workers. And they're very, they're trying to make it, they would probably call it like a culture of excellence, where they do the thing where they try to rank everybody and push out the low performers to make room for supposedly the new people. And the New York Times story was just horror story after horror story of how that, what people think of as work-life balance is just so far out of kilter at Amazon. All sorts of stories about people being asked to do things that are just, beyond the pale for the purposes of the work, being told explicitly that work has to be more important than their family, working really long hours, and just all sorts of stuff like that. And the flip side of it, I think that this New York Times story was according to someone from New York Times, I think, tweeted that it was the story that got the highest number of comments ever on a New York Times story, because everyone who either currently works at Amazon or had previously worked at Amazon wanted to say, here's my story working at Amazon. Either I have my own horror stories, or I work there and it wasn't like that at all, or I work there and my group was good, but I know other groups that were like this. Lots of people, and not just on the New York Times, but everywhere around the web, are throwing in their own, stories about Amazon. Because Amazon's a big company. A lot of different people have worked there. And I think the most interesting part of this, I guess if you didn't know, this is what it was like in Amazon. And by the way, this is what it's like in a lot of companies, also particularly startups, although it's a little bit more appropriate for it to be that way in startups, because in a startup, it's like lots of hard work, but also potentially lots of reward, whereas Amazon's so big that at this point, you could work yourself to death, and it's not like you're going to be a multimillionaire off your stock options in a few years, whereas in a startup, you have a vanishingly small chance of doing that, but at least it's a chance.
Yeah, that's often overstated.
I know, but it's non-zero. Like the whole thing, Amazon is still operating as if it's like, oh, you're going to get all these options in the stock and blah, blah, blah. But that's like, if you're going to work yourself to death for a company, make it be your startup. Like the startup that you founded, that you have equity in, that you're going to get rich off of if it succeeds, that you're going to be ruined if it fails. That, I think, is the only sort of reasonable way. And even that is probably not a great idea because almost all startups fail. And so, but if you want to give it a run, that is the thing to do. Your company, your thing. Amazon is not going to be your company. You are probably not going to get rich off Amazon stock. Probably don't want to work yourself to death. But anyway, some people are workaholics. Some people like that. Some people thrive in that atmosphere. Some people don't have families. Some people do want to dedicate themselves to their job. So there's two sides to this story here, depending on how you look on it. But the most interesting part was the reaction of, because Amazon's got to do damage control because they're going to have lots of difficulty recruiting because now everyone thinks Amazon is a terrible sweatshop, which, by the way, it is probably, and especially much more so for blue-collar workers rather than the white-collar people who are writing their code or running their websites or whatever, and no one seems to care about that. But anyway, setting that aside, how do you pronounce his last name? Bezos?
I can never get it right.
Bezos. Anyway, Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, put out this statement, and the little things I pulled from it is these two little passages. I don't recognize this Amazon. He's talking about the Amazon as described in the New York Times. This article doesn't describe the Amazon I know. And I love that aspect of this thing that he's writing because all he's doing is restating the problem. I'm totally sure that he doesn't recognize that Amazon because the experience of Amazon for the CEO is not like this at all. He's probably a workaholic and he probably works himself to death, but he's the CEO. He stands to gain the most from it, and he's working like crazy because he's a workaholic and that's what he likes to do. His work-life balance is exactly the way he wants it. Like, this is what he made for himself. Of course he doesn't recognize this Amazon. You don't recognize this Amazon because you're not a lowly Amazon employee being told to work yourself to death for no payoff. You're a multi-bazillionaire who is a workaholic like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or any of these other people because that's what's in them and they're driven to do that. And I'm sure there are employees of Amazon who are like that as well. They're not going to get their rewards from it. But again, some people just thrive in that type of atmosphere. But the reason this works as a New York Times story is most people do not thrive in that atmosphere. And to most people, this reads like a horror story. And so you read it and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe what it's like. Now, if I ever had an idea that I was going to work for Amazon, I'm definitely not going to work there now, because I read this article and the things that I hear happening, that's like my nightmare of the worst possible job I could ever have. Most people are going to have that attitude. And that's why I would try, if I had to sit down with Jeff Bezos, I would try to sit down and say, look, I don't know a lot about a lot of people, but I think I know a little bit at this point about professional programmers. And if ever there was an employee less inclined to be into the sort of gung-ho, just work, stay in the office at late hours, grinding, it is the programmer for a giant Fortune 500 company. Because programming, I think, is one of those type of things where the Ballmer curve aside, we will put a link in that in there. It's one of those things where... Ballmer Peak, yeah. Where you can't, like, the harder you work and the more you grind, the worse you program. Like, you have to have times of rest to think about things. You have to walk the dog, like Marco said. You have to take a shower. Like, that's where you actually solve all your programming powers, is in the shower, while you're walking the dog, while you're sleeping. Sometimes you wake up in the morning, it's in your head. If you stay late one night and try to work on this thing and work for like 5 extra hours, there's no point. It's specifically for programming. And they hire, not that everyone they hire is a programmer, but if you're going to say, we only want you to work here if you thrive in this type of atmosphere, you're going to be missing out on a lot of really, really great programmers. Because in my experience, great programmers tend to be less receptive to that type of work environment, mostly because I think it's not conducive to good programming, than, for example, salespeople. If you wanted to find the world's best salesperson, I bet they do thrive in this type of environment, because sales is all about go, right? And they're go-getters. They're going to get the job done. They're going to put in the long hours. They're going to do the business travel and all that stuff. That's not how programming works. So I don't know about all the other positions that they're filling in marketing and other things that are outside engineering. And again, setting aside the blue-collar workers that are being exploited in the factories packing packages in 100-degree heat in a building where the air conditioning doesn't work, where Amazon thoughtfully provides ambulances outside, so when the workers drop dead, or don't drop dead, but collapse on the line, that they're whisked outside to the ambulance, that is a whole separate issue, and that is terrible. So really, just to put this in perspective, what we're talking about is like highly paid programmers being asked not to see their kids, not people being asked to work in 100-degree heat in a factory and collapsing from the heat and being taken to company-sponsored ambulances outside. But anyway, I think this is just a bad business decision. That this is not the way that you should run a company of Amazon size. This is not the way you should manage an organization that is focused on engineering. And they would say back to me, our company is incredibly successful. Look at the amazing things that we've done. We're a giant retailer. We do all these things like S3 and EC2, and you think we're great at services, and the reason we're like that is because we have this attitude. And I would say, no, you do that despite that attitude, and then I would make him read Creativity Inc. and learn that success hides problems. Then we would go back and forth, and in the end, he would do what he wants because he owns the company and I have a podcast. But anyway, now that we've played out that little thing.
You have many podcasts.
Well, that's right. I have multiple podcasts. Thank you, Jeff.
Don't undersell yourself.
Right. Wow. That was my thoughts coming out of this. And so I think it's good for stories like this to be in the media to sort of raise awareness of this. Because I don't know if Marco's ever been in a job like this, but I don't think I've ever been in a job like this either. But I've been adjacent to jobs like this. I've known people in jobs like this. I've seen parts of organizations that I've been in that are like this. And it really is my worst nightmare. Like, I would never want a job like this. And I know a lot of people who wouldn't. If they could possibly help it. And that's the thing about hiring engineers and programmers. They can get work elsewhere. So if you don't have a stock that is going to have the potential to skyrocket in the near future, it's going to be difficult to attract those people if you're going to work them like this.
My first job out of school was working for a company that actually made slot machines for Native American casinos in Oklahoma. And the company at the time was, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 developers, and they were all ex-EA folks. Like, well, they were part of a company that was bought by EA, and then EA ruined it, as EA is off to do. And so these were guys, generally, actually, there were no women there at the time that were developers. So they were all guys. They were typically in their late 30s, early 40s, generally speaking, completely single. And generally speaking, didn't really have a whole lot else to do other than work. And not that they weren't great guys. And I don't mean that disparagingly. It's just the fact of the matter was they didn't have spouses or children, and many of them didn't seem to have a whole lot of hobbies other than work. And so they worked constantly, just constantly. And here it was, I came in fresh-faced and, right out of school, and I didn't want to work constantly. I didn't want to work nonstop. And I left the company mostly because I had been asked to do this really kind of impossible project before a trade show. And I worked, I don't remember now, but I want to say it was 11 or 12 hours a day for like a month or two, including most weekend days, trying to get this thing to work. And I eventually did get it to work. And then the trade show came and they were preparing everything they were going to show, and then just decided, you know what, we're not going to show that after all. And I was furious. I was beyond furious, because here it was, I busted my butt for all that time. And it was like, well, we don't need it after all. Thanks though. And I don't know, maybe that makes me a millennial in the disparaging way. Maybe that makes me not a team player, but I just thought it was ridiculous that here it was, I couldn't do any of the things I wanted to do for a month. And then they just up and decided, oh yeah, we don't need that after all. And I left the company.
You should not get a job in the games industry.
Oh, totally. No, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. But I didn't know any better at the time.
Yeah, well, that's part of that, I think, is, again, speaking to programming, which is the profession that I think we're all the most familiar with, even Marco, in large companies, is that experience of having like a miniature version of what the game developers call crunch time, where something needs to ship and everyone puts in long hours and it's all hands on deck. I think every programmer goes through that, even if only on their own projects for like fake artificial deadlines that they made for themselves. But certainly in other companies where you have a software product or a release or a trade show or something, and everyone is killing themselves to make a deadline. That experience, I think, is formative for programmers because it teaches you, like, it makes you, it's difficult. It's probably the most grueling physical thing that programmers have to do, because programming is not a grueling physical job. You're not cracking rocks with a hammer all day. You're pressing keys on a keyboard and sitting in a chair, right? But it does take its toll on you in terms of lack of sleep, or even just sitting in a chair all day, or not eating well, and never mind seeing your family or whatever. Like, say you don't have that, you're just a single person right out of college. What I think you learn from that is you reflect on it after the experience, which hopefully ends in whatever trade show or whatever, and you say, what is it about the piece of software that we were creating together that made it so difficult to do the thing we wanted to do? Like how, it's the stupid cliche that you see on all the posters, work smarter, not harder. But in programming, like, there's actually something behind that, which is, if you had done your earlier work differently, how would it have made your later work easier? If you, and that's basically all programming is. Like, you write the program, then you realize how you should have written it. The next time, if you're lucky enough to write a similar program, you write it in the better way, and then you realize how you shouldn't have written it differently. And the next time you realize you have made it easy to change along these axes, but did not realize that this other axis was the one that it's going to change along. So now it's really hard to change in that way. Like, that's all programming is doing something, then realizing how you could have done it differently to make the future changes that you have to make for whatever reason easier to make.
Yep.
And so crunch time and that, that hellish experience of just having to sit there and just grind yourself into dust to try to get work done teaches you how to do your job better a little bit. But I think it also teaches you how incredibly inefficient it is to bang your head against that wall. That how, if you had merely gone home at a reasonable hour and had a full night's sleep and come in the next morning, you would have solved this problem faster and better. I think that's another thing you learn during crunch. And that gets back to the this article that I don't even know if it was related to the Amazon thing. I don't remember. It was so long ago. I put these links in here. But it's from Dustin Moskovitz talking about how the 40-hour work week is not he says it's not a great compromise between capitalism and hedonism. It's actually a carefully considered outcome, I'm quoting from this thing, of profit maximizing research by Henry Ford in the early part of the 20th century. Basically, if you're running this experiment and say, hey, if we work people 80 hours a week versus 10 hours a week versus 20, like, there is a maximum where you get the most productivity out of people. If you work them like crazy, they get tired, they get sloppy, they get angry, they do worse work, they are less productive. And of course, if you have them work 1 hour a week, your output is not good. So that you're trying to find, not that 40 hours is some magic number or whatever, but you're trying to find that the maximum where you get the most productivity out of people on a sustained basis. If you drive people like dogs, maybe you'll get extra productivity out of them, but you'll pay for it later. And if you want to have a sustained business, like maybe that's why you do startups. Like there will be no sustained business if we don't kill ourselves for these 2 weeks leading up to this trade show. So you kill yourself leading up to the trade show. Again, I would say make sure you're killing yourself for a potential payoff that's going to benefit you, not somebody else, because it's not worth killing yourself for somebody else to get rich. But you want to find a way to get the most out of people on a sustained basis. And usually that ends up being a work week and a work environment, especially for programming. It does not look scary from the outside. That you work reasonable hours, that you get a good night's sleep, that you get exercise, that you eat right. That is the only way in any human endeavor to have sustained productivity out of people. And programmers are not like people breaking rocks with hammers, in that if you grind one of them into dust and they leave the company with RSI or have a nervous breakdown or do something else terrible, it's not so easy to just find another one. It's not just like a warm body in a chair where you just need ballast for your giant barge, right? It's supposedly a highly skilled job. And so if you're grinding up those workers and spitting them out, that's even worse than if you're doing the same thing. It's worse economically, if not morally speaking, than doing the same thing for a position where if people get disgruntled and leave, you can easily find new applicants for it.
Well, so that's something that I think I think that actually is partly the case, that the industry does have so many, like, you know, the right thing to do from our perspective, because the three of us are all pretty experienced programmers who are approaching middle age, who we'd like to think are wise and care about spending time with our families, right? And so we are the ones saying, you know, to do things with higher quality, you should really have wiser, older programmers who are more experienced, who will therefore work way more efficiently than young, crappy programmers who are being worked 80 hours a week. But there are so many of those young programmers willing to go work for companies like Amazon, which, by the way, I mean, this story to me was nothing new, because I've heard horror stories about how horrible working for Amazon is for years. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody who's ever paid attention to Amazon and people who work there. But you know, I think there's enough people willing to go into this business, to go work for a big company or a startup. Like there's enough input of new computer science graduates or new people who are teaching themselves programming who want a job all over the world. There's enough of these people coming in. It's kind of like the entertainment business, where the employers are able to abuse and burn people out. And you know they're able to do this because there is still a huge supply. You know, the way they always complain and make a bunch of noise about how there's a shortage of good programmers in this country is, I think, mostly BS.
I think it's totally true. There is a shortage of good programmers. You didn't say a shortage of programmers. You said a shortage of good your analogy to the entertainment industry is exactly right, because that's why games development is so bad, because everybody wants to be a games developer. Hey, doesn't that sound fun? And companies take advantage of that enthusiasm. Oh, you know, there's a million applicants for this thing because you get to be a game developer. You get to make games. Isn't that awesome? Now they grind you into dust, and when you burn out, there's another enthusiastic person knocking at the door. I want to be a games developer. Games are awesome. Let's grind you up. But Amazon is not an entertainment company. Amazon, I don't think, has that kind of draw. So then you're just left with the generic draw of, I want to be in the tech industry, which is better than, you know, working in the mailroom at a Fortune 500 company, and certainly pays better, but it's nothing compared to the games industry, or like you said, the entertainment industry. I want to be in TV. I want to be in movies. Like, that is a perfect opportunity to grind up enthusiastic, naive people. But I just think the supply of programmers it's more difficult to find, you know, like I said, good programmers. Now, maybe Amazon has the right strategy. We would rather grind into dust tons of programmers and not even use them the most efficiently. And the ones that survive will learn really hard lessons and become amazing, you know, efficient people. And the ones that don't, oh, well, they'll leave and get a job someplace else, but we'll just scoop up a set of new graduates. Maybe that, and in aggregate, gives them better throughput than trying to find programmers and give them a nice environment to work or whatever. But I don't know, because Google seems to me takes the other attitude where They try to give, they try not to work people to death. They try to give people, room to figure out what it is they're going to do. And it's like a nice work environment. And Apple kind of seems in the middle where they don't tell you what they're doing. But from my understanding is that people at Apple work super duper hard. And I worry that Apple is grinding them up. But you can't really tell because I think the screams are muffled by whatever giant umbrella and Apple. The reason Apple I think gets away with it is because they're more like the entertainment industry. I don't just work in the tech industry. I work for Apple. I make iPhones.
Well, I think that used to be the case for a long time, but I think now they're having a really big problem attracting and retaining good talent. And there's lots of reasons for this. And one of them, I think, is this problem of they do work people really hard. From what we've heard, it sounds like they really do work people harder than what I would consider healthy. And they consider that okay from levels all the way to the top. And this is the kind of thing, like, once workaholism sets into a company's culture, it never leaves. That it is something that is so incredibly difficult or impossible to ever roll back. It only ever gets it's like being tough on crime. It's like politicians. It can never be less tough on crime. Like, it's the same thing. Like, there's so many factors that just encourage it to build upon itself and to increase the workaholism rather than ever tone it back. And it's so. In Apple's case, it's pretty clear from anecdotes from the executives all the way down to the employees that this is just how the company works, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. And that is one of the problems that is going to make it hard for Apple to attract and retain good talent over time. And you mentioned a few times so far, John. You mentioned that startups are kind of exempt from this, and I don't necessarily think that's true. Now,
not exempt, but it's a better fit. Like that like to get a startup off the ground it's one of those activities that you're going to have to work yourself to death, but it's not, it's not sustained. That's the type of thing where it's like, this is not sustainable. We can't run a company this way. If we really want to have sustained productivity, we need to do X. But in a startup, it's like, sustained productivity of what? We're going to be out of business in 2 weeks if we don't do this thing or get this feature ready for the trade show, which again is why most startups fail, because you try really hard to do this thing. It's a young man's game. It's for a short period of time. There's a clear thing. We're going to try to do this thing. And there's a time cap on it. You have exit strategies. Like, it is not like, I'm going to work at this company for 30 years. And this is how for 30 years, I'm going to act as if I'm in the first 6 months of a startup. Like, that's why I think you have to match the sort of culture and work ethic and amount of effort to the potential reward and to the expected time horizon. So I'm not saying it's like good in startups, because startups grind people up and spit them out as well, but that's what startups are. It is totally inappropriate for a company the size of Amazon, I think.
Well, but you have to nip that in the bud early, because it builds over time, because like startups typically take on the work culture of their founders. Like that is just, it's just what happens. It starts off as the founders. As they grow, the company still works the way the founders set it in motion to work, either intentionally or not. And so, like, I've been fortunate that my jobs have, I've had crunch times here and there, but it's never been the kind of thing that I hear about from other people, like from some of these really horrible like game companies or companies like Amazon. It's never been that bad. And part of that is because I've always stood up for myself. And I've always been at companies early enough to have the ability to push back a little bit and to stand up for myself a little bit. And it didn't always work, but most of the time I was able to do it. And this is the kind of thing that you can't just say, well, this one time we got to push really hard, but then we're gonna be healthy again, or then we'll hire more help or whatever. Like, because in reality, the later time when we're gonna do this temporarily, but then we're gonna fix it, that time never comes, because after you finish with this horrible death race, there's another one that comes up right afterwards.
But it does come. Like, I think in the natural life cycle of a company is the founders that get the startup off the ground have to be workaholics, otherwise you don't succeed, because that's the nature of the beast there. But then I think most companies settle into sort of fat, happy middle age where the company carves out places for people who just want to show up and, punch the clock and do a boring job and not be too stressed about it or whatever. That's what happens when companies get big. That's what happens when most companies get big. This phenomenon of gigantic companies that are still run, quote unquote, like startups, where they're, hungry and working their employees to death is, I think, a fairly modern phenomenon. I guess not modern. I guess you still have, sweatshops is the oldest, the old slavery and sweatshops, the oldest form of like, we're just going to grind people up. But in our lifetimes, the trajectory was, if you were a startup at all, you got out of that phase quickly and became a serious business where everything was much more relaxed. And that's why smaller companies came and ate your lunch in the late 90s and 2000s with disruption and all that stuff. And now I think the new normal is what you're reacting to is like, isn't that what always happens? A disruptive startup is started by some workaholic, becomes successful because those guys work themselves to death, and that workaholic retains control of the company. Another phenomenon that is much more common now than it used to be, retains control of the company and pushes that culture down on all the employees and never lets it go because they're paranoid that they're going to get their lunch eaten by the next little disruptive startup. Apple is weird in that it started as a small, hungry thing, got fat and happy, and then went from fat and happy with a giant, Apple Advanced Research. What the hell was that thing called? Apple Technology, ATG, Apple Technology Group. They were at the point where they had people doing like, architecture astronaut stuff, making up these grand plans like OpenDoc and Apple Technology Group, ATG. Thank you, tipster. Making these pie in the sky things, and people who had jobs, they're just going to be like an Apple lifer and just hang around and think grand ideas and maybe noodle on a product or something that might become a product someday. And Steve Jobs came back and said, we can't afford that. We're going out of business, cut down to the bone, and turned it back into a workaholic culture. So that is a weird, Apple has a weird history anyway. That is a weird phenomenon, but I think it's what you're reacting to, Marco, is the Amazon, even like Elon Musk, PayPal, Tesla, that kind of model where you never let the company get out of startup phase because that's how you get disrupted. And you just, no matter how big you get, even if you're as big as Amazon or Apple, the way you survive is by continuing to act as if you're in a startup. But it's not, you're not anymore. It is an inappropriate environment to grind people up like that because you can't have a company with 30,000 employees, all of whom stand to become multimillionaires by the next quarter if you just hit these numbers. That's not going to happen, right? That time in the company's life has passed. It's weird that when Apple had the second phase, they made a whole bunch of millionaires out of stock options or whatever. But again, if you're using Apple as your model, okay, start a company in the 70s, be phenomenally successful, almost go out of business, but not quite, and then come rain, that's a tough plan to pull off. So yeah, if you can almost go out of business and then become the biggest company in the world, you'll make a whole bunch of new millionaires, and Apple did. And so those people probably don't regret working their fingers to the bone during that phase. But that, I think, is an aberration. I think the people working their fingers to the bone at Amazon are not going to get the same payoff for their effort of investment.
Right. And this is actually, most startups that come out of, our industry, you have to be like one of the first, 5 people who work there to really see like a massive payoff in all likelihood. I've had so many friends and so many companies, so many startups. I know very few of them who have actually had a meaningful payout from those stock options. Like it just doesn't, like the numbers are so far against you. It's not even close. Like chances are you probably won't make anything from your stock options. And if you do make something from them, you might make, maybe an extra, in the tens of thousands of dollars, which is nice, but not necessarily worth working yourself to the bone for 4 years. It doesn't usually work out the way that they promise. But it is like the entertainment business. Like they know, like the people who start startups, the people who fund startups, the people who advise startups, they all know that this promise is there, and they sell people on this promise, and people come in thinking, man, I'm going to get stock options, and I'm going to make a ton of money. And the fact is, it doesn't usually work out that way, unless you are one of the founders. If you're one of the founders, you'll own enough stock to make it work pretty well. But if you come in as employee number 40 or whatever, the chances are you're not gonna make a ton of money on that, but you're still going to be in this environment where it is insane workaholism and everyone is pressuring you to, dedicate your life to the company in every waking hour. And by the way, I don't think I've ever seen a startup fail because it didn't execute quickly enough. Have you ever seen that?
I'm sorry, a lot of them fail for that reason, but I don't know if that means like you should have gone faster. Well, could you have gone faster? This gets back to what I was talking about with like, is it actually more productive past a certain point? Because yeah, you can do crunch and you can for a certain period of time, but and you can go longer if you're younger or whatever. Let's not make any more analogies here. But at a certain point, you get massively diminishing returns and then negative returns. You're hoping that the life of a startup is short enough that you don't reach that point. But for big companies on a sustained basis, like, what you're getting is like, this startup failed. This startup was going to fail anyway, because I can tell you the 17 reasons the startup was going to fail, even if they have executed it more quickly. It's always easy to find lots of reasons why a startup could fail. But startup is the one type of business where sometimes it really does matter. Oh, if you had actually been in that trade show and this other company hadn't, it could have really changed, the history of your company. Or if this demo to an important investor had gone better, you would have got that round of funding and instead you didn't. Like, that's the life of a startup. It's always balancing on a razor's edge of something or another. So I think that is a real thing happening then. It's just that no one really knows. A lot of it is just serendipity. A lot of it is luck. A lot of it is right place, right time. A lot of it is things you can't control. But as far as I've been able to determine the successful strategy of startups, it's really, really difficult to succeed as a startup with a super laid back attitude, unless you start off with basically unlimited funds or really long runway and a lot of money or whatever. But for the most of the startups starting from zero, you really do have to work hard for a short period of time. And I think that the whole startup phenomenon, viewed broadly, is lots of small companies trying a bunch of ideas and finding out as fast as possible whether they work or not. Like, that's the whole thing. And so try this, didn't work, okay, let's try another startup. Try this, didn't work, or try to do the pivot where you're trying to pretend you're the same company when really you're basically just doing multiple startups at the same time. Because you don't want to find out 3 years later that your idea doesn't work. You want to find out ASAP, because you can't crunch for 3 years.
Yeah. The thing to me is, in my personal opinion, the best approach is, whatever your job may be, just work really, really hard coming out of school or in early on in your career. Work really hard and establish yourself and get yourself to the position that you are making enough money that you are comfortable. That could mean $30,000. It could be $100,000. It could be $300,000. It could be $3 million. However you define comfortable, get to comfortable. And once you're there, then you really shouldn't have to do a death march ever again. And if very rarely. I worked very hard for a very long time, given how old I am. And I'm now at a company that I rarely have to do a death march. I could probably work harder. I could probably make more money. I could probably even find a different job where I could work harder still and make more money still. But in the end of the day, we are comfortable. And I am able to pretty reliably put in about 45 hours a week and then come home to my family. And to me anyway, that's more important. I work so that I can live. I do not live to work.
Well, and also you're working so that you can crunch at home now, because I think
also true.
The best analogy for the sort of second crunch, like if you're just out of school and you want to get your career established and you're working hard at your job, whatever it is, make sure you're not working too hard, make sure you're not being exploited. Then you have a kid and you realize, oh, you can have crunch time at home too, and it's called an infant, or twins, or even more. Like, that's the type of thing where you feel again that. Your child is basically your startup times a million, right? You are willing to crunch for that. The whole point, like, if you decide to have children and this is what you're going to do with your life, it's super hard and it's going to be a lot of work, and there's crunch time in kids. And it's not when the kid is 15 years old, although depending on the kid, whatever. But yeah, infants are hard, and you will put in long hours, and you will be, at the end of the rope, your rope, and going out of your mind. But that's what you're signing up for when you have a startup or have a kid or whatever. But I think for most people, that is a choice that they're making, and they feel like it is well worth it to do for their kids. Not so much worth it to do it for Amazon that doesn't care about them and will never visit them when they're old.
So in summary, the best startup is a child.
Or the worst startup, depending on your point of view.
Well, and also I'd just like to point out, too, that, and John, I still disagree with you on a lot of this. I don't agree with the assumption in our industry that crunch time is required for a startup success, because I have seen many counterexamples to startups that have succeeded, that do very well, that don't do crazy crunch time burnout workaholism.
Well, let's put it this way. It is a common characteristic of startups that succeed. Whether it's necessary or not, you can say it's not really necessary. It just so happens that a lot of it's just a correlation, not a causation. And in fact, those ones are succeeding despite the crunch. I'm willing to believe that. But you have to say it's highly correlated. Like successful startups, they all have stories about crunch, right?
So would you say it's sufficient but not necessary?
I don't know. It seems the correlation is pretty darn strong. Like I totally think it's possible to succeed without it because again, I think even more important than how much you crunch is right idea, right place, right time, right talents. Like some things you can control, some things you can't control. Those are much more important than how hard did you work. Because the common theme, and I think in all startups is, including the ones that fail, is a bunch of people working really hard. So it's not correlated with success. It's just like, if you're in a startup, this is the way they're done. I think what you're saying is like, if all the startups got like a big startup convention, they said, let's just all agree that all startups in the entire world, we're not going to drive ourselves into the ground. Would they have the same ratio? I think they'd probably end up having exactly the same ratio of successes. And who the successes are may shift around a little bit, but not in any significant way. And it's just that like, it's like a race. Like if when the race decided they were going to walk instead of run, the race would be slower, but everyone wants to get to the finish line as soon as possible. So they all run. You know what I mean? Like you'd say, I don't think it's necessary to run to have a race. If we all just walked and were calm and we just said you can't have both feet off the ground at the same time, the results of the race would be the same, but it's human nature. You just want to run, even if, you're going to get tired faster. I don't know. This is a terrible analogy.
Yeah, it doesn't match what I've seen. Like I have seen, like to me, the big crunch time is kind of like people who always talk about how busy and stressed out they are. It's like that. It's like a voluntary take on of stress, and it is almost always self-imposed and optional.
Well, but you see everyone else running. Don't you see everyone else running and you feel like you have to run too? And again, if you feel like, well, if they weren't running, I wouldn't be running, but they are running, so I feel like I have to run. The root question is, would you actually be, like if you could run the experiment, if you got identical groups of people or something, and like you said, you guys aren't allowed to crunch and you guys are. This gets back to the productivity thing. Wouldn't they be more productive if they had a good night's sleep? But I think for a young company, there are events and deadlines, whether self-imposed or not, that are significant enough that can make or break the company. That's just not true for a larger company. And so by crunching, you can temporarily increase your productivity. So it's like, juicing or taking, steroids or whatever. You are temporarily increasing your productivity, knowing full well, or maybe not knowing, but you're going to find out that your productivity is going to fall off a cliff after a short period of time, because the most important thing right now is who is ready in time for this trade show.
You know what? Honestly, I've never seen that. I've never seen a company that had to rush to make a trade show or an investor meeting or anything where that was actually really going to be the decision. Like usually, either you have traction or you don't. Either your product is rooted in a good idea and is finding an audience, or it isn't. And usually it doesn't come down to one date, one deadline, one meeting, one presentation.
Not just one deadline, but like to use your career at Tumblr as an example. Like it may not have been the crunchiest of crunches, but there was a time early on when you were worried about servers going down and you would get paged in the middle of the night or whatever. That's a work-life balance that you would never accept now. But had you not been there to fix some MySQL problem in the middle of the night or whatever, and Tumblr got the reputation for the site that was always down, that could have really affected, Tumblr might not have taken off, as there's lots of other sites that were similar to Tumblr, and that type of thing of like, oh, it's, it has bugs, or it's always down, or it doesn't work right, or the sign up, like, not that you were killing yourself to do it, but certainly you were working really hard during that time, because there was only a few people, and it's not like you had this giant staff of people to watch all the servers. It was you, right? That is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like that you didn't sleep for 7 days straight to make some trade show. Everyone's crunch is different. But during that time when it was a small group of people trying to keep this site that is growing incredibly fast up and running so that you could take advantage of the traction that you had, that was an important thing to do. And if you had not done that and said, you know what, I'm going to ignore that page and I'm only going to work from 9 to 5 and I'll bring the servers back up in the morning, that would have materially affected the prospects of Tumblr's success and probably would have got you booted out of the company. Because it's like, look, there's only a couple of us here. You can't just say, I'll fix the server in the morning because your work-life balance is important. You have to do it. And you felt responsible for doing it, and you wanted to do it, and you were invested in doing it, and you did it, and Tumblr is successful. Don't you think there's a connection between that?
There is a connection, but I think it's a relatively loose one. Like, Tumblr was taking off whether I had the site up or not. And if I took an hour to fix the site or 5 minutes to fix the site, didn't really matter.
But you couldn't come in. You couldn't come in the next morning and do it. You couldn't say, you know what, I'll look at that tomorrow.
Sometimes problems were going on that we didn't even know about. Sometimes our monitoring system failed us, and we weren't alerted to problems, and things were down for hours, and it was fine. Like, I mean, like I always point to this example back then. Like, Flickr was down for like a whole 4-day weekend one time, like in 2008ish. A week later, everyone forgot.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter is a good example, too, where they were down all the time. But I think that's after they'd crossed the hump. Like, you know what I mean? You don't know. Once you're on the other side of the hump, there's a certain inevitability that takes on. It's just that, like, when you're on the near side of the hump, not the far side of the hump, you're never going to get over. You're never going to become the thing that people talk about being down for 4 days unless you, in the beginning, have some minimum level of dealing with growth in a way that lets you just start, taking off. Like, I mean, again, just think about how you worked. Was it all just a mistake that you were putting in those long hours and worrying about things? And if you had known more, then you would have just been like, just chill, don't worry about it, don't work such long hours, and the company would have been equally successful. Were you just running because you saw everyone else running? You're saying that you should have just been working from 9 to 5, and in the end, your sort of hard work and dedication to making sure things were up all the time was a foolish expenditure of energy, and you should have just, like, if you had known then when you know now, you would have just worked from 9 to 5, confident in the fact that the success of the company would have been equal. You could be right, but the bottom line is you ran because you saw everyone else running, and I think that will continue to happen.
Most of the time, I did just work, 9 to 5 or whatever. It might have been like 10 to 7 or whatever, 10 to 6. But like, most of the time, that's all I did. I was not programming at home for Tumblr ever. Like, that happened maybe twice, like, ever, just because I had to quickly fix a bug or something. But like that hardly ever happened. That was not at all normal. For the most part, I maintained a very healthy work-life balance with Tumblr.
You were sleeping next to your phone, weren't you?
Yes, but that was a lot of that. Honestly, was self-imposed stress, and that was mostly because we took too long to hire a sysadmin, which was partly my fault because I kept saying, you know what, I still got this. I mean, it was certainly partly my fault.
But if you didn't have that drive, that self-imposed stress, don't you think that someone, be it David or someone else, would eventually get to the point of, you know what, you either need to start sleeping with your phone or you need to hire someone to sleep with their phone? Like, if you didn't have that, if you weren't as proud of your work as you are, then I think it would have caused problems.
It's possible. I mean, it's hard to know retrospectively, what would have been different, but we at Tumblr in those early days when it was just me and David, we did not have a culture of workaholism, really. David pushed himself a lot harder than I pushed myself, but I wasn't really penalized for that for the most part. He would be thinking about it constantly because that's just David. He would be thinking about anything constantly, like whatever his work is the rest of his life, he'll be thinking about it constantly. He's just that kind of person. But I'm, I try to have a more separated balance between home and work, and my side projects or my family versus my job or whatever. So
I think your scale may be calibrated strangely because the amount of time and effort you put into your work now is probably still higher than most people who are in those fat and happy jobs.
Not even close.
Maybe you haven't spent enough time in the fat and happy companies to see exactly how little work you're saying maybe you're not as big a workaholic as David, but you have a higher than average drive to do things. I mean, I think Casey would agree on that. Like, the amount of stuff that you have to do and the amount of stuff that you actually do, you need to be doing stuff. You need to have lots of things that you're doing, and you work hard at them, harder than you actually need to work at them. So I think your scale may be off a little bit. And I'm willing to believe that you don't work as hard as David because, Tumblr is his thing and you were brought on, right? And so, again,
sort of,
the successful companies that are founded by workaholics or whatever. But in the grand scheme of things, like, I mean, and again, it still gets back to your question, like, does that mean you had to? Maybe not. Like, you can't run the experiment. You can't go back in time and say, I'm going to do Tumblr again, but I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to hire that system in earlier. I'm going to just have a laid back attitude and everything will be fine, because really that's not what matters. In the end, what matters is we had the right idea. We had the right design. We had the right, so many other things. Our timing was right. the choices we made about what the product was going to, we made the right choices about product design, stuff like, there are so many things, we made the right choices about when to take funding, when not to take funding. Should we, you could ask the same thing of like Mark Zuckerberg with the tortured history of Facebook and how so many companies tried to acquire it and how he said no and how that could have been a terrible mistake and how hard did he work and how hard did he work with people under him and all that other stuff. It's difficult to say, but, whether it's necessary or not, it seems to be a characteristic of the startup that it kind of in the same way that it's a characteristic of the games industry. And in the same way you could say that it's not necessary and it shouldn't be done, but it is what we have now. And to change it, I think you have to change, I don't know how you change it for startups. For games industry, you have to change the incentives, or maybe you have to have workers that unionize, or maybe you have to have that backlash that happened a little while ago with EA. The EA spouses and all the EA employees complaining about getting ground up by the machine. And I think this New York Times story about Amazon is part of that phenomenon, raising awareness about this issue among the pampered white-collar workers, so the pampered white-collar workers can have angry blog posts and write a Medium post about it, just citing Henry Ford. I don't know, maybe that's the system working.
Our final sponsor this week is Hover. Hover is the best way to buy and manage domain names. Go to hover.com and use promo code UNEVENTFULWEEK for 10% off your first purchase. When you have a great idea, you want a great domain name that's catchy and memorable. Hover gives you exactly what you need to find the perfect domain for your idea so you can get started actually working on it. They give you easy-to-use, powerful tools to buy and manage domains so anybody can do it. And the support team is always ready if you need a hand. They are known for their no-wait, no-hold, no-transfer phone service. So if you want to talk to somebody at Hover, you can call them up. A real-life human being is ready to help. They pick up the phone, no wait, no hold, no transfer. Plus, if you don't want to call anybody, they have great online help if you need it. In less than 5 minutes, you can find the domain name you want and get up and running. All you have to do is search for a few keywords, and Hover will show you the best available options across all the domain extensions out there, from the nice old ones like .com, .net, all the way to the stupid new ones like .diamonds. And you can search everything all at once. It is the best search I've seen for all these domains. If you've ever registered a domain name anywhere else, you know that it's usually a pretty unpleasant experience anywhere else you do it. It's at best, it's ugly and confusing. At worst, you feel like you're being ripped off or it's a scam. Hover, I've never had these problems, Hover. I have used so many domain name registrars over the years. Hover, I've never had these problems with. Their site is respectful of you, the user. It doesn't try to scam you. It doesn't try to trick you. They do not believe in heavy-handed upselling or weird little, confusing promotions, try to get you to buy something you don't need. They don't work like that. And their site is incredibly well designed and it's easy to use. So you go in there, you got to buy something, you got to go to the control panel, whatever you want to do. It makes sense. It's nicely designed. It looks good. It's easy to use. You can figure it out. Even sites that seem well intentioned to me, I've used many registrars, as I said. Even the ones that seem well intentioned, their stuff is still ugly and confusing to actually use. Hover is both well-intentioned and well-designed and easy to use. It is so rare to find this. I've never found this combo besides Hover in this business. It is great. So check out Hover. They even have email hosting if you need it. They have great solutions from simple forwarding for just $5 a year all the way to full-blown hosting starting at $20 a year. Check it out. Lots of great options at Hover for registering domains, hosting your email, whatever you need to do. Go to hover.com and use promo code UNEVENTFULWEEK for 10% off your first purchase. Thanks a lot to Hover for sponsoring our show once again.
One more bit on workaholism before I move on, because I don't want people to think that workaholism is all bad. And I was thinking of, the times that I've, the various places that I've worked where I was thinking of one particular instance where I came home on a weekend and it was a programming problem, database design programming combo problem that I had been working on all week and had come up with a solution that kind of worked, but I wasn't satisfied with it. And I think I woke up like on Saturday morning and I had a good idea for how to do it. I think I'd finally figured it out and I just rewrote it all in a weekend. Why does that happen? Like, part of workaholism among the founders and among everybody else is that if you have a job that you love doing, if you love programming, you will find yourself thinking about it during your idle time, again, walking the dog, taking a shower. And sometimes, this is all pre-kids. If you don't have kids, again, if you don't have kids, you don't realize how much free time you have. So enjoy, youth is wasted on the young and free time is wasted on people with no kids. That you actually have a lot of time, even if you're married. I was married at the time, but there is enough time for you to to spend one weekend, reasonable hours, stopping for meals, not staying up late or anything, but just like, you know what, this weekend I'm going to do this thing. And why did I do it? I guess I was invested in the company. It was a small-ish company that had been bought by a larger company, but it was a bunch of people who were all friends, who were all working on a product and a thing that we really believed in. This is when I worked in the place that did ebooks and everything. And, it was something that we all believed in, and it was important to get this done. And there wasn't any sort of external deadline. There wasn't any reason this had to be done. I had already done it at work. I just had a better idea for it. And I enjoy programming. So what getting back to the Marco lifestyle, what I did that weekend for fun was I programmed. Programming is fun if you're a programmer and you like programming. Was I a sucker for doing work on the weekend? No, but it really has to be on your own terms. So I think that's the difference, where if you feel like you have to do this to keep your job, or you're being pressured to do it, or like the culture at work is making you put in hours that you don't want to work, or there's an expectation that you're going to do it on the weekend. No one had any expectation I was going to rewrite this perfectly good working thing that I had written during the week, that I'm going to rewrite it all on a weekend because I had a better idea. I wanted to do it and it was fun. And so that's like the light side of this, where if you are lucky enough to have a job that you enjoy, and your quote-unquote leisure time activity on the weekend is to do more programming, even for your job, that no one asked you to do, because it will make you feel better, and you'll come in the next week and be like, finally, I can delete that crap that I wrote last week and replace it with this thing that I rewrote entirely in a weekend, and it's so much cleaner and so much nicer, and I have so much more confidence that it's bug-free, and it's easier to expand in these ways. That's a fun thing to do if you're a programmer. Again, we should all be lucky enough to have the type of job that we actually enjoy doing. It's, I guess, probably rare, because how often do you work in a company that you feel that personally invested in? How often do you want to do that? The farthest I get from it these days is probably, I will find myself thinking about work problems during the weekend, in the shower, drifting off to sleep. I just usually save those ideas until I go back into the office on Monday to work on them, because I feel like, you know what, they get enough of my time, and really when you have kids, you can't, it's a phase in life. What would you rather be doing this weekend? I can't imagine. I guess the closest I got was doing my reviews, where I would carve out time to do reviews. But even that, I felt like, boy, if I wasn't getting paid for these reviews, I would have stopped doing them a long time ago, right? So there always has to be a balance. So anyway, I just didn't want to make it seem like if you are working really hard at your job and bringing your work home with you, it's not always bad. Sometimes you're choosing to do it, and then it feels better, even though in effect it's the same thing. Oh, you're basically doing unpaid work for the man on your own time. You're a sucker. Sometimes it's fun.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely been times that I've not been able to get a work problem out of my head, and the best way to get it out of my head is to get it out of my head and put it on paper, so to speak, and just do it.
Well, one way to say that Marco cheats on, and Marco's version of this is that when his boss lets him off for the weekend, sometimes he rewrites things in Go. Just because it's fun. Of course, his boss is also him, but it's a different him. It's like the working during the weekend, and then it's like, you know what? I can rewrite this all in Go. And then he comes in, and so you can tell your boss later, I rewrote it all in Go over the weekend. It's awesome. It's like, oh, that was nice. You didn't have to do that.
Thanks a lot to our 3 sponsors this week, Harry's, Warby Parker, and Hover. And we will see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
I don't even know if you did that on a weekend, but of course time has no meaning in your world anyway.
Yeah.
Weekend, weekday, until Adam enters school, then weekend to weekdays will suddenly have meaning again.
Oh, yeah. No, I can't wait for that to begin, because we had a nice routine going. By the way, I think that you are probably overestimating how much I actually work, like time-wise.
Well, nowadays I know, but I'm just saying, like let's put it this way: you put in more effort than I think I would put in if I was in your position. And I don't know, Casey, do you think if you were in Marco's position in life, would you put in as much effort as he does on the various projects that he does, or would you slack off more?
I honestly don't know. Half of me wants to say I would slack off 10 times more, and the other half of me says I think you might be overestimating how much time Marco spends sitting in front of the computer.
No, I mean, you guys, you are both smart, curious programmers. You would get bored senseless if you weren't using your brain.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're doing it like to be a magnanimous. It's just, it's the same with all of us. Like, your brain will eat itself if you don't give it something to do.
Right. Like,
and it's like that's how workaholics feel too. Like, Elon Musk feels exactly the same way. He's like, look, if I don't do spaceships and electric cars, my brain will eat itself. I have to do this. It's not like it's barely even a choice. Like, that is the type of person they are. I just feel like that you have more. I have a higher capacity for doing nothing than you do, I think. Honed over many, many years. Like, the idea, like you said, you're going to go off on a vacation and sit on the beach and do nothing. I'm pretty darn good at that at this point.
Right. See, I can't do that. I mean, I'm going to the beach next week. I'm planning, like, I'm bringing my laptop. Like, the idea of going to the beach and doing nothing, that sounds awful. Like, I would enjoy about maybe 2 days of that, and then I'd be like, all right, I got to turn my brain back on now.
Yeah, I have a much higher tolerance for it. I can go much longer. I agree that I couldn't do it like year round, because I would, my brain would eat itself too. Like, I would be building tiny machines out of sand. Like, I would just have to be doing something, right? So we're all like that to some degree. It's just a question of what kind of tolerance you have for it. And I feel like as part of it is being old, where you're like, I did all the working hard stuff and I still do it, and like, it just like just a plain old boring 40-hour programmer work week leaves me more like mentally tired. And like the beautiful thing about vacations is you can get away from all your responsibilities except keeping your children alive and feeding yourself, right? And just have 20 minutes to sit on a beach and just look at the clouds go by, right? And that I feel like recharges me so that I can go back to my regular life. I don't think I could do it year round, but as I get older, my tolerance for doing nothing gets greater.
Yeah, we've talked about this on the show. I used to hate going to the beach, which I only ever did a handful of times in my life. And as I've gotten slightly older, and Marco and I are the same age, I've found that if you put some sort of tent-like object on the beach, so I'm not sitting in direct sunlight, and put a good book in my hands, I could do that easily a week. That being said, when I was at the beach, last month, I definitely spent a few hours programming towards the end of the trip, because I had an itch I decided I wanted to scratch and it couldn't get out of my head.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever programmed on vacation, but I think part of that has to do with like the environment is not good for that.
Right, you don't have your big monitor, you could spread out like you talked about last week. You're programming in a phone booth.
No, there's a bunch of other people there. And they want to go places and do things, and kids are running around. Yeah, that too. No, I mean, like, for me, like, if I'm going to be doing something with my brain on vacation, usually that's when I will write, I'll do other things. I won't program necessarily, or I'll program very little, or I'll do some kind of satellite project like the website. But usually that's when I will write blog posts best, is when I'm away, because then I want to use my brain, but I don't want to do any programming because I would prefer to just do it on my big, nice home computer.
Yep. See, this is why I refuse to learn how to drink coffee, and why I'm kind of glad I don't have a 90-inch monitor at home.
Goes in your mouth, Casey.
Oh, that's the trick. Damn it. I don't want to get to the point where I can't function until I've had a cup of coffee, or I get a headache, or I get cranky, or I just don't think that things feel right. I don't want that. So I'm glad that I don't like coffee. And additionally, I'm glad that I'm used to a 15-inch laptop. I mean,
I don't know. All right. You've just broken that analogy there. The coffee thing, addiction to substances, I can see something, but I believe there is no physical addiction component to large screens. I'm pretty sure that it's not. It's just merely a preference and a convenience. It's like like if I get too used to not being half immersed in water all day, I'll want to be dry every time I go to sleep. So that's why I sleep outside on the lawn. It's like, come on, what are you doing?
My point is, I feel only ever so slightly handcuffed by not having a second monitor when I'm developing, whereas you feel completely neutered if you don't have a 25 plus inch display as you're developing.
It's really convenient. It's like, it's convenient to have a room that fits your bed with more than 6 inches around all sides and the walls, because then you can walk around the bed to get onto it. Yeah,
sure.
And it's like, I don't want to get used to that. I want to make sure my bedroom, it just has 1 foot alleys around the bed, and I'll shimmy through it, because if I get used to a bigger room, then when I go someplace else, I won't be used to it. Like, I think your analogy is breaking down there. Anyway, you should be leaning on the fact that I don't want to be tethered to a desk. I want to do my computing, like you said, sitting next to Aaron on the couch or whatever. Those are the advantages you should be playing up with laptops, not saying that really you want to force yourself to use a 15-inch monitor, even though it's less convenient. So I think you're barking up the wrong tree with explaining why you like laptops. I think there are reasons, but these are not them.
Fair enough.
Speaking of, Casey, have you thought any more about your computer decision that we talked about last week? Have you thought any more about that since then?
Well, to be fair, that was all of 3 days ago as we record this.
Preserve the illusion. It was last week. Go ahead.
Oh, right. It was easily a week ago, and I've thought long and hard. No, not really. I don't know. The problem I've come to is I think all three potential machines, a Mac Mini, a 5K, and a MacBook Pro, all three of them.
And a Mac Pro.
No. All three of them, not four of them, all three of them have definite advantages. They really honestly do. And I can't figure out which criterion I think is the most important. Is it having something that can move? Is it having something beautiful to look at? Is it having something that I can barely see that's stuffed in the corner that I only really use remotely or very rarely physically? And I can't figure out which one I want. And I think a couple of people have said this on Twitter via feedback, but I think really what I'm going to do is which is what I had planned last week, is I'm just going to sit around, see what comes in the fall with regard to MacBook Pro updates and potentially any other kind of update, and just see if that sways me one way. Like, let's say for the sake of discussion that I decided I really wanted a 12-inch Retina Mac and the MacBook One wasn't out yet. Well, then fast forward, the MacBook One is out and all my problems are solved. Maybe there'll be some other thing, some feature that I'll really, really love in the new MacBook Pro, or maybe even a new Mac Mini or the new 5K iMac. And I'll say, you know what? Darn it. That's it. That's for me. But sitting here now, I really don't know. Well,
first of all, as I said, suppose a new Mac Mini comes. It'll still suck. It'll still be a bad deal. It still won't.
Still be $1,000.
It'll still be at least $1,000 for a good spec. It'll still not have very good options. If you look at the ones that we have today, it's you max out at 2 cores. You can barely get an i7. You max out at 1 terabyte built in, and only then if you do the Fusion. It's like the options. You can't even spec out higher if you wanted to, unless you get into the iFixit territory of opening it up and putting your own crap in there, and even that's becoming harder and harder. The Mac Mini is so, and I say this having one here and being very happy with it, but for your purposes, I think again only if it's going to be used as a server only. Does that make sense? I think. Thinking about it more, as I did the edit, I was thinking about it more. I think what you should probably do is get a 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro again.
And that's the most likely outcome.
Because, the big thing is the way you work right now. If you work the way I work, where you always work in the same place in the house, where, where you don't take a laptop on the couch and do real work. If you're always working in your office upstairs, then get a 5K. Fine, done. But because that isn't how you live, and you made a good point about wanting to be with Aaron at night while you're working, that makes a lot of sense, and that's something that your home office can't offer you. So if that's the way you work at home or compute at home, then I think a 15 inches is probably the best option for that, because for anyone else, for other people, for people who don't program for a living or for people who have lower needs, that'd probably be too big. Then in that case, I would say get the 13-inch Retina MacBook Pro, because for most people, that is like the nice middle of the road, cover everything kind of computer. For you, I'd say, your needs are higher. Go for the 15. And I think the 15-inch MacBook Pro or the 13-inch, but in general, like the MacBook Pro / MacBook Air range is the default option for if you don't know what your needs will be, just get one of those. And in your case, you don't know what your needs would be. Like, if you knew what your needs would be and your needs matched my needs, again, get the 5K, done. But because that's a big unknown for you still, and even if it was firmly nailed down, it probably wouldn't line up much with my needs and with the way I use mine, or the way John uses his. So, because you don't work the way we do, and you don't know how you're going to be working over the next 4 years, I would say just wait for the Skylake updates and then get the updated 15-inch.
Yeah, that's the most likely outcome. The 5K, when we started the conversation last week, I did not even want to entertain the 5K as an option. But the more we talked about it, the more I thought, you know what? If I dedicate myself to only being at my desk, that really does make sense. And to be, if I'm honest with you guys right now, my current personal machine, which admittedly has a Platter hard drive, which obviously changes whether or not it's usable, as compared to my work laptop, which has an SSD. But my personal machine today, the Wi-Fi has been off for months, and it's been connected via Ethernet because it's a 15-inch MacBook Pro, because I never move it. Because I always will just grab my work computer, because whether I want to work or play, it has everything I want on it. And so if we can get over the separation of church and state, if you will, I'm going to have this laptop, my work laptop, pretty much regardless. And even if I left this job and got a different job, or even if I left this job and worked for myself, I would probably end up getting a laptop regardless of whatever other computers I have at home. So there is a compelling argument for the 5K iMac, as much as I really don't want to entertain it, because I think it's ridiculous and it's a stupid piece of furniture.
Yeah, you got to do what I did with my HDTV and cut out a piece of cardboard the size of the 5K iMac and stick it in where you're going to put it in your house, and then see, like, does this block the morning sunlight that I like when I'm eating my breakfast? Does this look ugly? Is it visible from the street and it looks weird? Like, pieces of furniture that big, you have to figure out if there's a place for them that won't mess with your feng shui, or however you pronounce it.
Cool. John, when are you departing? Tomorrow?
Tomorrow morning. Yep.
You're going to send me all sorts of pictures probably, and I'm going to be super jealous, and I'm going to hate you.
We'll see.
Can you have your family take pictures of you and then send those to us?
Oh God, that'd be the best.
They don't take. I'm the only person who takes pictures of anything. It's so bad that now when we go on like vacations with the rest of my family, like my parents and sister and brothers, they just let me take pictures for everybody now. Which basically means there's a lot of pictures of my kids, and a lot of pictures of my wife, and not a lot of pictures of me, and a medium amount of pictures of everybody else.